I'm Melisana May Peñaranda, together with Abrigo and Cruz Pixie, and we will explain what we have traced, and we will discuss the carbohydrates.
Trace and discuss the pathway of digestion and absorption of carbohydrates, include the sites, enzymes, hormones, and products.
Digestion works to break down all polysaccharides, disaccharides, and complex carbohydrates into monosaccharides for absorption. Although not all are completely absorbed in the small intestine, like the fibers, this digestion is performed by different enzymes. For example, the starch and glycogen are breakdown into glucose by amylase and maltase. Sucrose and lactose are breakdown by sucrase and lactase respectively.
And now let's discuss the carbohydrates from the mouth to the stomach.
The mechanical and chemical digestion of carbohydrates begins in the mouth. Chewing or mastication breaks the carbohydrate foods into smaller and smaller pieces. The salivary glands in the oral cavity secrete saliva that coats the food particles. Saliva contains the enzyme, which is the salivary amylase. This enzyme breaks the bonds between the sugar units of disaccharides, oligosaccharides, and starches. The salivary amylase breaks down amylose and amylopectin into smaller chains of glucose called dextrins and maltose. The increased concentration of maltose in the mouth that results from mechanical and chemical breakdown of starches in whole grains is what enhances their sweetness. Only about 5% of starches are broken down into glucose in the mouth. This is a good thing because more glucose in the mouth would lead to more tooth decay. When carbohydrates reach the stomach with no further chemical breakdown occurs because the amylase enzyme does not function in the acidic conditions of the stomach. But the mechanical breakdown is ongoing. The strong peristaltic contractions of the stomach mix the carbohydrates into the more uniform mixture of kind food being digested.
From the carbohydrates from the stomach to the small intestine.
The chyme is gradually expelled into the upper part of the small intestine. Upon entry of the chyme into the small intestine, the pancreas releases pancreatic juice through a duct. This pancreatic juice contains the enzyme, the pancreatic amylase, which starts again the breakdown of dextrins into shorter and shorter carbohydrate chains. Additionally, enzymes are secreted by the intestinal cells that line the villi. These enzymes, known collectively as disaccharides, are the sucrase, maltase, and lactase. Sucrase breaks sucrose into glucose and fructose molecules, while the maltase breaks the bond between the glucose units of maltose, and lactase breaks the bond between the galactose and glucose. Once the carbohydrates are chemically broken down into single sugar units, they are then transformed into the inside of the intestinal cells.
Good afternoon, Doc and classmates. I'm Trixie Cruz and I'm going to continue the reporting. So next is the absorption going to the bloodstreams.
The cells in the small intestine have membranes that contain many transport proteins in order to get the monosaccharides and other nutrients into the blood, where they can be distributed to the rest of the body. Fructose is absorbed by facilitated diffusion, while glucose and galactose are actively transported. The first organ to receive glucose, fructose, and galactose is the liver. The liver takes them up and converts galactose to glucose, breaks fructose into even smaller carbon-containing units, and either stores glucose as glycogen or exports it back to the blood. How much glucose the liver exports to the blood is under hormonal control, and you will soon discover that even the glucose itself regulates its concentration in the body.
So next is undigested carbohydrates in large intestine.
As mentioned earlier, not all carbohydrates are digested and absorbed in the small intestine. Almost all of the carbohydrates except for dietary fiber and resistant starches are efficiently digested and absorbed into the body. Some of the remaining indigestible carbohydrates are broken down by enzymes released by bacteria in the large intestine. The products of bacterial digestion of these slow-releasing carbohydrates are short-chain fatty acid and some gases. The short-chain fatty acids are either used by the bacteria to make energy and grow, are eliminated in the feces, or are absorbed into cells of the colon, with a small amount being transported to the liver. Colonic cells use the short-chain fatty acids to support some of their functions. The liver can also metabolize the short-chain fatty acids into cellular energy.
Good day everyone, I'm Princess Brittany Abrigo and I'm going to discuss the topic maintaining blood glucose levels.
Either too much or too little glucose in the blood can have health consequences. Glucose regulates its levels in the blood via a process called negative feedback. The body senses blood glucose levels and maintains the glucose temperature in the target range. The glucose thermostat is located within the cells of the pancreas. After eating a meal containing carbohydrates, glucose levels rise in the blood. Insulin-secreting cells in the pancreas, or the pancreatic beta cells, sense the increase in blood glucose and release the hormonal message insulin into the blood. Insulin sends a signal to the body cells to remove glucose from the blood by transporting it into cells and within the cell to use glucose to make energy for building macromolecules. In the case of muscle tissue in the liver, insulin sends the biological message to store glucose away as glycogen. The presence of insulin in the blood signifies to the body it has just been fed and to use the fuel. Glucagon-secreting cells in the pancreas or the pancreatic alpha cells sense the drop in blood glucose and in response release the hormone glucagon into the blood. Glucagon communicates to the cells in the body to stop using glucose. More specifically, it signals the liver to break down glycogen and release the stored blood glucose into the blood. So blood glucose levels stay within the target range and all cells get the fuel they need to function properly. Epinephrine or adrenaline is released in response to stress or exercise. It causes breakdown of glycogen or glycogenolysis, which releases glucose and increases blood glucose levels.
So for the summary,
Sites, mouth, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and the liver. For enzymes, salivary amylase, pancreatic amylase, sucrase maltase, and the lactase. For the products, dextrins, maltose, glucose, fructose, and galactose. For the hormones, insulin, glucagon, adrenal, or